Hey everyone, welcome back. Hopefully we're in for a bit of an interesting and busy week this week, being as it is my last week of leave. I did cut out the middle stringer, the last one that needs to go in. That's dry fit, it's good to go. It might need a little bit more dry fitting once I do the layup. Exact same process that I'm going to do as I did on the main stringers, is I'll do a real strong layup outside the boat and then just go tie it in when the time comes. At the moment I've just got the first side tabbing in to hold the piece together, which just makes working it way easier. And you can see I've just got a couple of bits of angle that are giving me the line joining the two pieces. I didn't scarf cut that on an angle, that's just straight up and down. I know, like, technically that's not the way you should do it. Whenever you're joining your stringers, you should have an angle cut. I just don't think that width is really gonna matter so much at all. I'm just gonna make sure that I do a real good 5 or 6 layer layup on each side. So this is a real good strong rib. What I did notice though is the previous one made out of ply, it had the joint also not scarfed, just at the base of where the wider part comes in, which world according to me is a bit more of a weak point, because you do have that sharp angle there. It's not a continuous piece, so if it were to crack inside that corner under any sort of pressure or weight, then having them not connected would have made it a bit weaker. That being said, I really don't fucking know, because I'm not actually a boat builder or an engineer. Also went to Bunnings this morning, got all the PVC pipe that I think I'm going to need. The two 90mm ones, they're going to be for the rigging and basically anything going to the outboard or going back to the transom. So one I think I'll dedicate to to the rigging, be it the linkages, all that kind of piss, and then the other one will be dedicated to like power supply, because the batteries are going to be up front with the console, having power supply. Bought all the knuckles and stuff that I need for that, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But first thing this morning, while that first little tab is curing off, I'm going to get in there with the vacuum, give it another real good dust out, try and get spend a good half an hour getting as much of the dust out as possible. That'll kind of prep me ready to acetone the existing hull. And then I'm just going to do a skim coat on the bits that I've already finished, so fully the outside there and the inside of the two stringers that are in place. I'll do a quick skim coat just to fill any large voids, and then I'm going to start laying down the strips of glass just to kind of thicken the hull and tie everything together. And I'll probably just do that like a 2-layer layup. So maybe just a piece of the lighter chop stringer mat that I've got down, and then some woven or BIAX, and then just another layer of the light chop down, and that will just kind of uniform everything out. I think that's a pretty good idea to do, especially once we get this stringer in, doing it in here and really strengthening up that keel line, because I did grind out a lot of glass, just chasing rotten glass or poorly bonded glass out of there. So I did end up taking a fair bit out, so I'll put a fair bit back in. And then I'll also start templating all the bulkheads. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. Alright, so I'm inside working on the templating for the bulkheads, because I want to cut them out and do the outside layers of glass at the same time that I'm glassing that stringer, just for a bit of economy of effort. So what I did here was I drew up a rough idea of what the inside structure is going to look like. So the vertical lines, as you see here, they're the stringers. The horizontal lines are either the transom in the case of number 5, or the fuel tank bulkheads in the middle here. And then I'm going to go with, at least on the inside run here, being the gap between the two big stringers, I'm going to have 4 bulkheads. And on the outside, between the outside stringer and where the floor will eventually tie into the hull, I think I'm going to have to go minimum of 4, maybe 5. And the reason is the the material that I'm going to use for the floor, if you get the 12mm thick, it can handle unsupported spans of up to 450. The 15 was up to 600 and the 20mm was 600 plus. And I think I'm going to go the 15 just for the slightly more than 450 gap or unsupported span length. That's just going to have a more stable feeling floor without the need of having heaps of bulkheads. That being said, I am still going to have a few. Just gone and started templating here. So real basic kind of way of doing it, just taking the measurements, cutting a bit of this core flute out and sending it down there. So I'm just trying to move that out of the way. And you'll be able to see that from the back of the transom I've taken the measurements that I needed. So that'll be where the bulkhead goes in, the existing bulkhead. That's as far forward as it can go while maintaining a perfect rectangle with the floor down for the fuel tank. Any further than that and the dead rise into the V hull would get in the way of it being flat, so that's as far as that bulkhead can go forward. I took the width of the console, knowing that it'll end there. About 500mm of standing space between the console and the start of the seat frame, and then where the seat frame runs. That'll give me the two narrow bulkheads, which is basically where the standing space is going to be, because I'll be able to put a hatch there, and this will be the one hollow cavity that gives me a bit of underfloor storage for things like flares, V-sheet, med kit, maybe some life jackets, depending on if I get the self-inflatable ones, I'll just use the big foam ones that I've already got, just all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of underfloor storage, but I more want the underfloor to be focusing on buoyancy. So two bulkheads in here, which will give us the storage on each side, and then everywhere else is just bulkheads for support of the floor and to compartmentalise where I'm going to foam fill for buoyancy. And then just with the like naming convention that I've used on the sheet, I don't know if this is the normal way to do it or not, but just starboard for the outboard side, starboard for just the normal, and then starboard fuel tank, port side, port side, so all the way on the outside. And that way I can get on the template here, and I know that the outline of the template as I've got it right now is good for both port and starboard 2, 3, 4, and then with some slight modifications being the dotted lines, it will be good for port and starboard 1 and 2 as well. And so I'm going to crack on and do that for the floor side. Now I don't think I'm going to have too much luck, or I don't want to constrict myself too much making this bulkhead meet all the way in the corner where the floor is going to meet, because that'll mean that my floor templating will have to be perfect as well. So what I'll probably do is I'll just shorten the bulkheads and have them come out to about here and then just go straight down. That's all going to be foam filled, so the fact that it's not compartmentalised doesn't really matter, because there's going to be no space for water to ingress into that side of the hull anyway because of the foam. And it'll just be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to me putting the floor down. So that's what I'm going to crack on with now, is getting some bulkheads for those sides. Hey, so just a quick kind of indicator at what inside here is looking like so far. I took basically a generic template. You saw, you know, the dotted lines, which were slight variations and all that kind of shit. But this is all of those templates cut out to more or less fit in the positions that they're at. And I'll do some proper measurements, find the exact positions that they're going to be in, and that's where I'll fit them to. But I think that's going to be a job for when it's a bit cooler tomorrow morning, actually sitting in here suited up with the the respirator on and the grinder, and getting these where they need to be. And potentially even start looking at tabbing them in some point this week. And you can see I've just got the PVC laid down just to ensure that it's got good clearance and stuff like that, which I'm pretty happy with. I think that I will, bad example there because that one needs to go down a fair bit, but on the sides that are going to, border the underfloor storage, just in these two compartments on either side of, where your feet will be going, or in between the console and the seat, is I will probably glass I might just foam fill this side, let the foam go through, and neaten up the foam on the other side. And then I will have a drainage hole for that compartment, or two drainage holes, just drilled through to go into the the fuel tank compartment as well, because then that'll be able to drain out the back of the boat. Ideally though, the hatch that I'll get will be fully sealed and watertight, those cut-in hatches that you just get from BCF or Anaconda, or from boathardware.com, all those kind of shit. They do kind of boast being waterproof, so making sure they've got a good seal, and although that will be an accessible compartment, it will also be a waterproof compartment. And the other option is that you've got those fully enclosed plastic tubs with the lid that you recess into the floor, and as long as the seal around the top is good, then the tub is fully sealed, because it's like full plastic tub that sits below the waterline. And if I do find that I'm going to go down that route, is I will probably foam fill around that plastic tub to a degree somehow. I don't really know how that's going to go. So that might be a case of, over the next couple of weeks, looking at storage options specifically for this area, so that I can build the compartments around whatever storage solution I'm going to use, because I do want to have max water tightness, but drainage where necessary as well. So if there's a chance that you're going to get a shitload of water in that compartment, it needs to be able to drain. Otherwise it'll just go into the other compartments and start seeping in under the foam, and over the course of a couple of years it'll just make it just a shitty, slimy, rotten mess. But yeah, that's what we're thinking about now.
Alright team, we are at a bit of a pivotal moment in the project, and that is that I, at the time of recording this, have gone back to work, so things are going to slow down a little bit. So I wanted to kind of talk breakdown of some things, like how much effort I've put in, how much money I've put in so far, and what's still to go. So when we look at like actual output of work hours, either just myself or with the boys, I took a total of 6 weeks of leave with a bit of a break back at work in between, so 3 weeks of leave, back at work for 2, and I just finished my last 3 weeks. Like I've always kind of said in every video, life tends to go on, so I wasn't able to take full advantage of every single day of those weeks, and I reckon I probably got about 25 days of dedicated days to working on the project. In regards to hours of output per day, it depends what you're doing. You might throw a 7-hour demo day in there on a Saturday, and then when it comes time to an actual day of glassing up the stringers, combined time of waiting for the resin to cure before you can flip it and do the other side, you might actually only put 4 hours of solid work into the project. So I reckon as at now, I've got about 100 hours of work into what we've done so far. And that number seems pretty high, considering, where the build is at and where I thought I would be able to get it to in about that time. So let's talk achievements. Is what have I been able to achieve so far? And there's a couple of pretty big ticket items in there that I'm really happy about. Main one is the transom. Getting that fully in, glassed in. There is a little bit more glass work that needs to happen, but that's just kind of extra support stuff that isn't necessarily the transom. It's just some shit that is actually going to be glassed onto it. So that's a big achievement there. I've done 4.5 out of the 5 stringers, half because I've glassed in the outside layup of that middle one, which you'll see me do in a sec, but it hasn't been put into the boat yet. But that's still a big achievement. Like the 2 outside stringers, or the 2 outboard ones, the furthest out from the keel, they were hard work and a pain in the ass and a big learning curve. And I was able to take what I learned from those 2 and apply it to the main stringers that run just off center, so the 2 bigger ones. But then because they're bigger, they ended up taking a fair bit of time and effort just to compensate for the size. So yeah, 4.5 out of the 5 stringers. I've roughed in and single layer glassed all of those bulkheads, which took a fair bit of time due to the templating and just the fiddliness, like finickiness of the shape and size of them. I've done about 1/3 of the hull reinforcement, which will come up at the end of the video. But I think kind of like the thing that is keeping me level-headed about, you know, just the whole ordeal is that I've done a shitload of demo. I think if you had to pick a specific thing that I've done on this boat where I have spent most effort, most time, but also had the most output, even if it doesn't, you know, really feel like good output, is the demo is that piece. There's been, you know, 4 or 5, 6 or 7 hour days just on the grinder the entire time. And I've saved you from having to watch the majority of that and just kept it to those first couple of videos in the series. But, you know, that's ongoing. You'll see me do all this kind of stuff, and this is happening Monday to Friday, and then I'll take the boat to work, you know, on the Saturday or the Sunday when there's no one at work, and I will put in a big day there. Just of note, if you do hear me saying I'm going into work, I'm doing that because it's really noisy, so I don't piss off the neighbours and there's no one really around at work on the weekends. But yeah, that kind of sums up all of the major minor achievements so far in the build. Obviously, I also did those duck boards, be it the shaping, forming, dry fitting, and then doing the glassing as well. And at some point I'll go through the process of trying to glass them to the back of the transom, which is still up in the air if just that laminate is going to work. So there might be a bit of a waste in time, or even, you know, an added bit of time to the build if it doesn't work. But, you know, we'll see how that goes when we get to it.
Well, as is tradition, and because it's so bloody hot, the GoPro shit itself went through. I did the single layer on the first side of all the bulkheads. They will need to get like fully trimmed down and stuff, just to fit inside, like I spoke about before. They're not really structural, although they will provide some structure, just given the strength of the thermalite with the bit of woven and chop that is impregnated into the thermalite. The board itself is a little bit structural, but it's just got a layer of thick chop to give it a little bit more, you know, like a tiny little bit more structure and a little bit more waterproofing. Not that thermalite needs waterproofing, it's just going to stop it from delaminating and turning into a shitty mess should water get into these cavities. So I tried to do it on the sawhorses to save my back. That just isn't a thing that was convenient to do. They just kept trying to fall off, obviously, when you put a little bit too much pressure on one side or another of the board, and it ended up being much easier to just get it done on the floor. So that's fine. They're basically cured off now anyway, because I also laminated the first side of the middle stringer, which is just curing off now. Like I only just finished it. On the floor, super easy. Obviously the previous ones were easy on the sawhorses because they're much bigger and they didn't require the balance that the little pieces do, but on the floor was easy enough anyway. Just a 5-layer layup, exact same layup, number as I did the main stringers, but instead of using woven, I just did a second layer of BIAX. And the reason for that is over this thin spans here, if you were to chop the woven really narrow to go over that span, it's going to try and de-thread itself, particularly when your gloves get a bit sticky and they start sticking to the individual fibers as you try to lay it down. It just would have been a massive pain in the ass. So I just went the extra layer of BIAX. So there is 5 layers total. On the joint, 7 layers total because of the 2 layers of chop that I tied the piece together, hence that little bulge there. Don't really care about the bulge, you're never going to see it. One thing that I did want to quickly talk about was these little inclusions here. They're the only air bubbles. Like, once again, I feel like I'm getting relatively good at the whole air bubble situation, particularly on a nice flat layup like this. These 2 inclusions that have been happening to me over most of my glassing jobs, it's fucking sweat. It's drops of sweat. It took me, this is my fucking 20th glassing job throughout this this process, and every single one of them has included some sort of inclusion like that. This time I happened to see the sweat drops run off my face, off the mask, and land in those inclusion spots. I'm going to be interested to see what it looks like when it's fully cured off, to see if a little bit of that sweat does like evaporate and it maintains, like a good structural bit of integrity. But both of those sweat drops landed on already very saturated cloth. So like I'm not concerned, but it was just, obviously it's sweat, like it's a drop shaped, like idiot. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. So I've got to let these cure off. In the meantime, I'll probably go into the boat and start doing a bit more vacuuming, getting it all ready and all that kind of stuff. But there's a little bit of a hiccup with that I'll probably talk over in one of the voiceovers that I'm no doubt going to do.
So the next thing that I'll speak to is cost. How much am I in it now? Now, this is strictly talking just the build, nothing to do with actually purchasing the boat, rego, or the mechanic stuff that I had to get done on the motor. This is just cost that I have contributed in the rebuild process. The thing that you're going to spend or buy the most plentiful quantity is your resin. You're going to go through a fair bit of resin. I've already put about 70 kilos of resin into the rebuild as it stands, and it sits at about $10 per kilo. So you're looking at about $700 of resin. I've used about 65 meters of chop strand matte glass, so that's probably about $300 worth, and 30 to 40 meters of structural glass, which is a little bit more expensive, so it's probably around the $250-300 mark as well. So resin is the thing that you're going to buy in most quantity. What you are going to spend most of your money on is the composite material, and in my case, that's the Thermalite sheets. The piece of thermo that I used for the transom was a piece of 38 millimeter thick, and it's about 2.4 by 1.2, kind of similar to a standard plywood sheet that you would get from Bunnings or whatever. And it was $1,000 just for that one sheet. And you use about 90% of that sheet just in the transom build, with some left over for some other projects that I need that thicker stuff for later on down the track. So yeah, $1,000 for that sheet. And then the sheets that I've been using for the stringers and the bulkheads, they are 19 mil thick, same outside dimensions, and they're about $500. So I've put about $2,000 worth of Thermalite just into the rebuild. So yeah, in those kind of stores, you're sitting at about $2,300, and I reckon just in other consumables like rollers, bucket, paintbrushes, latex gloves, whatever else it may be, probably another $300 to $400. So at the moment, I reckon I'm about 2,700 in, and I'm pretty happy with that so far. I'll talk more to the composite material that I'm going to use for the floor and the gunnels a bit later, but that stuff is a little bit more affordable, I guess you would call it, and perfectly suitable for those particular applications. And like I said, I'll speak to that in a sec.
Holy, alright, so that was like, 2.5 hours of just de-dagging that shit that you saw me glass, which was yesterday in my timeline. Just wait for that car to go past. Yep, so I've got all the bulkheads in their generic size and shape, glassed and de-dagged, trimmed, ready to go. They'll obviously need a little bit of final fitment to fit into where they need to go. And I got that center stringer, the very last one. It's all de-dagged, beveled to what I think it needs to be beveled to, and it is also ready to go. A little bit of a problem with that, and I'll jump in the back and show you, is it's really kind of hard to see, but I would have a go grinding out the shit glass, and I think I would do a good enough job. And then I would come back in the morning after it had a day to soak, well, not soak, but like just sit, and the humidity or just the heat in general, whatever it may be, would get this all that shit, the moisture in the glass would wick back out, and I would see all these spots. So I obviously haven't chased that bad glass out enough, so I'm not going to put that stringer in anytime soon, just for some other things that are going on with my timeline for work and stuff like that. So I'm just going to keep working at getting the extra glass down on the hull, on either side, and that way the sides will be ready for the first opportunity to fit the bulkheads in, and the rigging tubes, and then the floor. I don't need to get this stringer down before I get the floor in, and floor is priority because I want to use the foam, and I need to foam before it's in the middle of summer and we start getting like build up kind of conditions of heaps of humidity and the wet season kicks off properly. So yeah, middle stringer can wait. I'll get the outsides of the hull sorted, and then the floor on. That'll be the kind of priority.
All right, so the way forward for the build, where do I see it going in the near future, and both in regards to what I need to do, what materials I need for that, and what kind of extra cost am I sort of predicting for it. So with work, I'm going away for 3 weeks, as at time of probably when this video is released. So there'll be nothing going on for the next 3 weeks, and until basically Christmas stand down, so we're probably looking 1st of December, it'll be going to weekend work and afternoon work because I'm back at work pretty much full time, and the only other time I'm not back at work is I'm going in for surgery, so I won't be able to work on the boat when I'm obviously in surgery and when I'm in recovery as well. But yeah, so progress will slow until Christmas stand down. What is the next step directly that I want to achieve? Well, I want to get the bulkheads in and get them fitted properly with the rest of the hull already supported. The rigging tubes in place, they'll need to be in place when the bulkheads go in anyway, but I want all of that subfloor done as the next priority so that I can foam fill the cavities and then lay the floor down. So that's the first step, and the end state of that first step, I think, is the floor being down. After that, I'll muck around with where the fuel tank is going to go, so that includes getting that last stringer in place, getting the fuel tank bulkheads in place, and that'll set up the framework for things like where the kill box is going to go and set dimensions for potentially getting another fuel tank made up. Post that, I'm going to move up to the gunnels. So the material that I'm using for the flooring and the gunnels is supplied locally in Townsville by a place called Fibre Finish, and it's called FF360 panel. And it's similar to Thermalite in that it is a mixture of foam and infused glass, but rather than having the glass layers randomized in the way of chop or layered within the Thermalite boards in the ways of the woven, this is foam sandwiched between two outside layups, so an outside underneath and outside on top. And you can get it in raw finish on both sides so that it's basically ready to continue use structurally. You can glass almost straight to it just with a little bit of sanding, or you can get finished on both sides, which is ready to receive something like the Everdeck foaming, like, you know, the flooring that you might put on, or you can get raw on both sides. And I'm going to use a mixture of both in all the different applications. So I'm going to use this for the structure of the casting deck, I'm going to use it for the gunnels, and I'm going to use it for the floor. But all of those are going to be varying thicknesses for what I require them to be. For the floor, I'll look at 15 mil thick, and I'll use probably the 15 for the structure of the deck as well, and the flooring of the deck. And then when it comes to the gunnels, probably looking at a 6 to 8 millimeter thick FF360 panel, because although it needs to be strong to lean on or stand on, it doesn't need to be a really thick gauge sheet because it is not part of the substructure of the boat. So yeah, that's what I'll need. And I think that I'm going to probably need about $2,000 to $2,500 worth of that material in those combined thicknesses. Maybe a little bit more. I think I'll probably be able to throw another $1,000 in resin as well to get me to a stage where all of the substructure, all of the floor, all of the gunnels, and all of the deck is made, and that's inclusive of the anchor well and the electric motor mount too. So yeah, I think that'll probably be about $3,000 to $3,500 to take the boat from where it is right now to that stage. Where to go from there is, you might have seen in the background of the videos, I've made that proof of concept console that is just glassed over plywood. So I've kind of been thinking to myself, it was originally going to be the console that I used, but why go to all of this trouble of replacing the timber in the boat just to put timber back into it? So I'm not going to. I'm probably going to use that as a proof of concept dummy console to build a mold out of, and I think I'm going to try my hand at molding a console purely out of fiberglass with the composite panel reinforcements on the important bits, like where the steering is going to mount or where the binnacle throttle control is going to mount, so that there is structural support there. But other than that, I think it'll just be a laminated, resin and glass laminated console done in a mold. And then after that, it really just starts to look like fit out, which is potentially going to be one of the more expensive parts of the build, depending on what systems I want to reuse and what ones I want to replace. But yeah, that obviously has potential to kind of blow out, but I'm not really thinking about that at the moment because structurally is all I need. And if need be, I can just throw everything that I already had on the boat straight back onto it and, have a working fishing vessel. So yeah, I guess that's it for this one, and it is it for the next 3 to 4 weeks. But yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm getting a lot more views than I initially anticipated, and so I do really appreciate the interest that you guys are showing. So I'll see you in a bit.